Alright, this is going to be the new intro. Good to see you all. Hope you're doing well. I finally have this setup that I want to the point where I'm able to actually use it, and sorry for how loud that guy is. Hopefully my audio editing skills are going to come in handy for at least getting that thing to shut up a little bit. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a segue from the story that we were previously reading. I haven't taken a look at any of the Reddits that we're going to be taking a look at today, but we're going to be going on the ProRevenge subreddit and see what sort of shenanigans we can get up to. So, I'm not really sure how I'm going to edit this, whether I'm actually going to have the story in there, or if you're just going to be seeing my reactions, probably a mixture of the two. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, go ahead, sit back, relax, get your favorite snack, get a drink, and enjoy. Alright, our first story today comes courtesy of PNK VDE. Greedy landlord gets what he deserves. Enjoy. This took place in Australia. About 15 years ago, I ran a small, successful beauty salon as a young 20-something woman. We rented a large space in the building from an elderly gentleman who let us do anything we wanted to the place as long as we paid our rent on time. We put in lots of money into improvements inside and built new rooms and redecorated, and he was thrilled with the new look. He eventually sold the building to a cocky, late 30s, smarmy businessman he called himself, who immediately raised the rent. No problem, business is business, but right from the start he had an attitude with an all-female run business and would constantly belittle us and make comments about how we didn't know business like he did. His favorite insult was to call us bimbos. Oy. We didn't really give two shits about what he had to say, in all honesty. We made our money off being attractive bimbos, as he liked to say, and he was a gross old dude with a mono blow, so we didn't pay any attention to him. A few months after the purchase, a massive construction project took place right near our building, restricting access and limiting the number of clients we could take due to no parking. The construction also pretty much eliminated any walk-in clients, as who would want to go to a salon when there's jackhammers going on right across the road. The new owner gave us 14 days notice of raising the rent yet again. We knew this wasn't legal, so we pushed back and got a tirade of abuse, and he was a businessman and we were just bimbos who didn't know the law. At this time, our lease was coming up for renewal in less than 3 months. We asked for a 1-year renewal on our lease, which he refused. I guess he thought he could bluff us. He said we could sign for 3 years at a much higher rent or, F off. So we chose the latter. With plenty of notice, we advised in writing that we didn't want to renew our lease, and he hurled abuse at us yet again, saying he would have rented it in no time and we would regret it. We moved 5 minutes away to a better location for close to half the rent, and the place is actually still thriving today, although I have since sold my share and moved on to other things. During the last month of our lease, the landlord would bring prospective tenants to the property day and night. He would even open the doors while people were in treatments to let prospective tenants look around. Fortunately, due to the construction next door, we didn't have too many clients, but the noise drove away every possible tenant away without us even having to say a word. The landlord had advertised the property, including many of the additions we had made. However, we had it in writing from the original landlord that they were to be removed and the shop returned to its original state. 4 bare walls. At the end of our lease, so that's what we did. We began to strip the place of the rooms we had built and move our stuff to our new salon. We took hundreds of photos for evidence and began to set up our business out of our new location. Well, to say the landlord was furious would be an understatement. He got a lawyer to write us a letter demanding compensation for the destruction of his property. We just referenced our contract, which specified a building of X size with 4 walls. We were still bound to our original lease that we had signed with the lovely old landlord. No new lease had ever been entered into Mr. Businessman. I offered for him to pay us for just half the cost of materials, no labor or contractor costs we had incurred, and we would leave the addition standing. He laughed in my face and told me he wouldn't pay $1 and that he would sue me for every dollar I made so hard that my grandchildren would be paying the debt. He was a charming bloke. We showed him our agreement and the original landlord that all changes needed to be removed and that this agreement would stand unless another was made and agreed upon by the tenant and the landlord at a later date. We stripped the place bare, didn't even leave a single shelf on the walls, cleaned it till it sparkled. He then got his lawyer to write another letter saying we didn't give enough notice that we were required to pay for another 3 years of rent. I said, fine, show us the contract where we agreed to this. We were then sent a copy of our email requesting a 1-year contract and an invoice for the rent for that period. Well, I said he never agreed to that, and we never signed a contract for that either. It went back and forth, getting nastier and more ridiculous. He was obsessed. I decided it was time to get some revenge and hit him where it hurts. His pockets. Every communication I got from his solicitor, I made sure was sent to me registered post. I would often respond to only part of a letter, requiring the solicitor to send another letter to follow up. I was a bimbo after all, right? I couldn't expect to answer more than one question at a time. I would respond to each letter by email but require a registered letter acknowledging receipt of my email. Solicitor was more than happy to oblige. More billable charges to his client. The more petty the landlord got, the more petty I became in response. Don't even try to out-bimbo a bimbo, mate. The landlord at the time had refused to refund our bond claim. He hadn't claimed at the time to do a final inspection. So we lodged a claim with the appropriate ombudsman. And of course the landlord came back with a laundry list of fake damage claims. Luckily we had our photos to prove he was full of shit. And he had to return our bond in full. By this stage we had been out of the premises for 7 months and we were doing great at our new location. In the time that we couldn't get anyone to rent the place due to the construction after reducing the rent 3 times, he spent so much money on solicitor fees and failed to collect rent that he had to sell the building and his wife filed for divorce. We found this out when the daughter of the lovely original business owner called us to let us know the sad news that he had passed away. He had always loved us girls, and we always would spoil him if he came to visit and fuss over him with coffee and biscuits and give him his favorite treatment of a hand massage. The daughter was friends with Mr. Businessman's wife and gave us all the goss. It took the new nasty owner another 18 months to sell the building, and all the while it sat empty and he didn't collect a penny in rent. Guess he shouldn't have played the chicken with the bimbos after all. We were actually pretty happy there, and probably would have stayed if he hadn't decided to prove we were so inferior. If you ever read this, suck it, Costa. Love the bimbos. That sounds like an incredibly stressful situation. I think it was handled very, very well though on your end, OP. Good job. And by the way, I don't know how many jump cuts you guys saw. I am not used to doing this on video, but I feel like it helps me stand out a little bit and make it a little bit more unique. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on, shall we? Alright everybody, our second story is gonna come courtesy of A Quiet Borderline, with what happens when engineering students are asked to truck-proof a mailbox. Yes, I know, there are a lot of mailbox stories on here, but I just learned this story from my dad involving my Uncle Dale, a family friend who passed away a few months ago, and figured you guys would get a bit of a kick out of it. Years ago, back when Uncle Dale and Dad were university students, their engineering professor came to their class with a problem that needed solving. His mailbox was getting broken by someone driving by every night, and he and his wife had to put something like 4 or 5 mailboxes, and all 4 or 5 times the mailboxes had been knocked over by someone driving a red truck. This professor offered extra credit to any group of students who could come up with a truck-proof mailbox that not only fit with city regulations but within a budget of $20, which back then was a good-sized chunk of change. Well, if anyone here knows anything about engineers, as Dad puts it, they love solving problems. And if it's engineering students, they'll make it an experience to remember. So Dad and Dale got together and got to work. They found a steel bar that fit within the mailbox regulations. Posts have to be a specific height, width, and depth, and filled the inside with a mixture of concrete and steel rebar. Once the concrete had cured, they welded 8 rebars to the side of the bar, bent them in half, and stuck them inside of the bucket to add extra weight. They filled the bucket with the heaviest rocks they could find. And as a finishing touch, they painted it brown and black to look like wood, and put the ugliest mailbox we could find on sale on top, welding it down just for good measure. They brought this monstrosity into class, Moore dragged it because it was so damn heavy, and told their professor to bury the bucket where the mailbox stood. Since they were the first to turn in their project, the professor agreed to give it a try. The night the professor and his wife were awakened by a metallic bang, followed by a lot of cursing. They went outside and wouldn't you know it, there was a bright red truck speeding away, and the mailbox was still standing, and at the base was a broken wooden baseball bat. 2 days later, the professor gets a bill in the mail for a hospital visit. Turns out when the passenger hit the mailbox, he did some serious damage to his arm and shoulder. They were planning on suing the professor, but the professor hired a lawyer who basically told the plaintiffs, "You just going to admit that you were vandalizing the mailbox multiple times?" That shut them up. To the best of my dad's knowledge, the mailbox is still standing there to this day. The other students who still brought in the mailbox had theirs gifted to different professors throughout the town and are also still standing. Hot damn. That has got to be some of the best revenge I've heard so far on here. I hope at least the passenger was alright, but karma's a bitch. Moving on. Alright, and our final story today comes courtesy of Yushua82. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I probably didn't. With party every night for a year? Okay. So I was told this story might fit here. TLDR at the bottom, and sorry for the poor formatting or grammar errors. I went to school in California during the 90s. I bought a house 4 years ago in a quiet neighborhood. I wanted to get into that neighborhood for years, and my best friend lived there. It was a couple blocks from my kids' school, and it was a good neighborhood. Well, COVID hit then. My neighbors across the street were forced to move at the beginning of the pandemic before the evict moratorium was in place. They were really good neighbors. We were friendly with each other, and we were sad to see him go. So when the property owner rented to a new family, we were hoping we would cultivate a friendly relationship. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. About a month after they moved in, the lockdown started, and that's when things went from 0 to 100 real damn quick. For the next year, every night there was a huge party. Cars down the street, music so loud you could hear it over regular house noise in every room in my house. My friend in the cul-de-sac would text me regularly if the music he was hearing was my neighbor's. We tried to be civil. I asked politely. I brought them beer. I offered some Killer 420, and eventually they threatened me and my wife, so we started calling the police. Also every night for 4 months. We organized with the neighbors, and they started calling the police as well. Eventually the others gave up and started selling their houses because the renters were just that bad. We were still upside down on our place, so it wasn't an option for us, and eventually the police told me that I needed to stop calling and that it wasn't their issue to deal with, that I was a bigger nuisance than the renters' music. It was at that time the housing market started taking off. Houses were selling in my area for $40,000 or $50,000 over the appraisal value. My wife and I looked at what we needed to make so we could move and listed our home for that. In 3 days, we had a handful of obscene offers to choose, but it was the lowest offer that stood out to us the most. Their offer was a good $20,000 under the next lowest, But they sent a letter, and I'm a sucker for a letter, and especially one with a picture of a young pregnant couple and a dog and a patrol car. Turns out the young man is a police officer newly appointed to the local PD, and he takes his patrol car home. I knew at that point this was the family to sell my house to. Money be damned. I moved out as the neighbors were throwing a huge party, and the next day the police moved in and they haven't had another since. I drive regularly on my way to my buddy's place and they just sit quietly in their garage looking bored. I make sure I honk and wave every time. TLDR, after a year of listening to my neighbors partying all hours of the night and pointing their speakers at my house and no help from the local law enforcement, I sold my house to a cop. Okay, that's pretty damn good. And I gotta say, in terms of getting your money's worth, I'd say you very much got your money's worth, even if it was a little bit under what the value was actually gonna be at. Very, very well done, OP. I'm impressed with the levels at which you were willing to take revenge. Whew, you should be proud of yourself. And everybody, that is going to go ahead and wrap it for this one. I have no idea how I'm going to edit this. That's going to be a fun thing to figure out. If it's jumping all over the place, I do apologize. I'm so used to editing audio. I'm not used to editing video to go along with it. So this should be a lot of fun. So anyways, everybody who watched and listened, I hope you enjoyed. I hope I provided something a little bit more interesting and unique to this than just hearing my sultry voice. So everybody, you all drive safe. It is an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you all hopefully in the next video. We'll go ahead and wrap up that creepy story in the next one. Peace out, everybody.